They were just ordinary families, until everything changed in a single moment. One child vanished from her bed in the middle of the night. Another said goodbye at school and was never seen again. These are not urban legends, they're real. And the people left behind are still searching, still hoping. In today's video, we'll revisit 4 haunting disappearances that tore families apart. Case 1. The girl who walked into the dark. It was Valentine's Day 2000 when the world of Harold and Aquila Degree collapsed without a sound. In Shelby, North Carolina, their daughter Asha, just 9 years old, went to bed like any other night. The weather outside was cold and stormy. The family stayed indoors, safe and warm, unaware that those were the last peaceful moments they would ever have together. Around 2:30 a.m., Harold checked on his children before going to sleep. Asha was under the covers, fast asleep in the room she shared with her older brother. But just a few hours later, when Aquila went to wake the kids for school, Asha was gone. No forced entry, no noise, no explanation, only the chilling reality. A child had vanished in the middle of the night. What made Asha's case especially strange was what she left behind, and what she took. Her book bag and some clothes were missing, along with a few personal items. She had packed a small bag as if preparing to leave. Witnesses later came forward, saying they saw a small girl walking alone on the side of the highway just before dawn, battling heavy rain and strong winds. They didn't stop. After all, who would imagine a child out there by choice? But investigators believe it was her, Asha, walking into the storm, and no one knows why. That moment would become the last confirmed sighting of her. From that point on, it's as if the earth swallowed her whole. No camera footage, no GPS, no trace. The search began. Immediately. Police, dogs, helicopters, neighbors, all working together to comb the woods and fields nearby. Hundreds of volunteers flooded the area. But it wasn't until days later that they found something. Several miles away, buried deep in the woods, searchers discovered a candy wrapper, a pencil, and a marker, items matching what Asha had been carrying. Even more alarming, a year later, her backpack was found buried in plastic along a construction site, more than 30 miles from home. It had her name written on it. That single discovery only deepened the mystery. If she ran away, how did she get that far? Who helped her or harmed her along the way? Asha was quiet, shy, and deeply loved. She was not the kind of child to misbehave or run off. Her parents insisted she had no reason to leave, no signs of distress, no arguments at home. She was an honor roll student, active in church, and terrified of thunderstorms. Yet she left during one of the worst nights of the year. What could have pulled her out of bed into that storm? Investigators have floated several theories. Grooming by someone she met at school, a manipulative letter or message luring her, or a plan to meet someone she trusted. But none of them have been confirmed. And in over 2 decades, no suspects have ever been named. Only more questions, and a family trapped in a grief that never stops repeating itself. For Aquila and Harold Degree, every day is still February 14th. They've never moved, never stopped, searching. They keep Asha's room just as she left it. Every year on her birthday, they hold a prayer vigil and ask the same question: where is our daughter? The case has gained attention from the FBI and national media, but still, no answers. The few leads that do come in seem to vanish like she did. It's as if someone took Asha into a different world, one no one can reach. A ghost story, but real. A missing girl with no ending, no remains, no justice. Just a silence that refuses to break. There is something deeply unsettling about the idea that a child could disappear without a trace in her own neighborhood from her own bed, while the people who love her sleep just down the hall. And what makes Asha's story different is the lack of any violence, chaos, or clue that fits. It's a puzzle with too many missing pieces, a vanishing that feels almost deliberate or orchestrated, the kind that forces you to wonder, what kind of world do we live in, where even a child's bedtime can become the edge of a cliff? The case of Asha Degree remains one of the most haunting, unresolved disappearances in American history. The pain of her family is visible in every interview, every desperate appeal, every pause when words fall short. They still believe she's out there, that someone knows something, and that one day the truth will come home. Until then, they keep the porch light on. They keep the prayers going, and they wait for a knock, a sign, a name. But as one family holds on to faith in the dark, another is still fighting the ashes of a mystery even more bizarre. A fire that should have destroyed everything, yet left behind only confusion, suspicion, and heartbreak. Because our next story doesn't begin with someone walking away. It begins with a house on fire and 5 children who were never seen again. Case 2, the Sodder Children, the fire that left too many questions. Christmas Eve, 1945. In the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family prepared for the holiday like any other year. George and Jenny Sodder were proud parents of 10 children. That night, 5 of them asked to stay up late and play in the living room. Their parents agreed. Around midnight, the family went to bed. But just an hour later, smoke began rising from the house. Fire engulfed the Sodder home in minutes. George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children. But the other 5, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were never seen again. What happened to them has haunted generations. At first, it seemed like a terrible tragedy, a fire that took 5 innocent lives. But then, the questions began. There were no remains found in the ashes, not a single bone, not a fragment of clothing. Experts said if the children had perished in the fire, at least something, teeth, bone, fragments, buttons, would have been left behind. But the site was empty, as if the children had vanished before the flames ever reached them. And that was only the beginning of the mystery. As the days went by, more and more details refused to make sense, leading the Sodders to believe that what happened wasn't an accident, but something far more sinister. The family quickly uncovered oddities from the night of the fire. Their phone line had been cut, not burned. A ladder that was always kept by the house was found tossed down a ravine. George's trucks, which he could have used to fight the fire, wouldn't start, even though they worked perfectly the day before. A neighbor said she saw people throwing balls of fire at the roof just before the flames broke out. Another woman claimed she saw the Sodder children peering out of a passing car window far from the fire, as if they were being taken away. These weren't just coincidences. They painted a picture of something far more chilling. A planned abduction disguised as a fire. But who would take 5 children, and why? George Sodder, an outspoken critic of Mussolini and fascism, believed it was retaliation. He had made enemies within the Italian immigrant community, and some had even threatened his family directly. A mysterious insurance salesman warned him weeks earlier that his house would go up in smoke, and that his children would be destroyed. George didn't take it seriously at the time. After the fire, he started to wonder, had someone followed through on that threat? And was the fire just a smokescreen to cover up a kidnapping? Jenny Sodder, unwilling to believe her children were dead, began testing theories. She burned bones from butchered animals to see what survived. Even after 2 hours, fragments remained. Yet her home had burned for just 45 minutes, far too short in her mind to erase 5 human bodies. She began writing to forensic experts. One told her bluntly, "No fire burns that clean." The inconsistencies only grew. In the years that followed, the Sodders received letters, tips, and even photographs claiming to show their missing children, older, hidden, possibly alive. In 1968, the family received a bizarre envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo of a man in his 20s with dark eyes and strong resemblance to Louis Sodder, one of the missing boys. On the back, a cryptic message: "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, A900132 or 35. No one could identify who sent it, but the Sodders believed it was him. George and Jenny hired private investigators and plastered the image on a billboard, begging for answers. Decades passed, and still no resolution. The billboard stood by the highway for over 40 years, a plea frozen in time, staring back at every car that passed. The official explanation that the children died in the fire never satisfied the Sodders. Investigators closed the case, but the family refused to stop. They kept the story alive through flyers, interviews, and constant pressure on the media. But public interest faded, and with George's death in 1969, followed by Jenny's in 1989, the momentum slowed. The remaining Sodder siblings carried the weight of the mystery, torn between grief and the faint hope that their brothers and sisters might still be alive somewhere, hidden by fear, raised under another name, or silenced by people who never wanted the truth to surface. What makes the Sodder case different from so many others is the sheer number of contradictions, physical, logistical, and emotional, a fire without remains, a kidnapping without ransom, a tragedy with too many pieces that don't fit. The lack of resolution creates a kind of psychological fire that never stops burning. For those left behind, closure wasn't just denied, it was stolen, and in its place only theories, shadows, and what-ifs. What if the children escaped and were forced into silence? What if they died some other way, and someone buried the truth? Or worse, what if the silence was intentional, kept alive by powerful people who never wanted them found? Even today, the story draws attention from true crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths online. Some believe the fire was a cover-up for human trafficking. Others think it was a tragic accident, made worse by desperate parents unwilling to accept the truth. But one thing is certain, something happened that night that doesn't add up. 5 children vanished in plain sight. And if the Sodder family is right, their story isn't just a cold case. It's an unresolved crime still echoing through time. And while the Sodders searched for answers in the ashes, another family, decades later, would be torn apart by silence, not by fire, not by smoke, but by a disappearance that took place in a place where every child is supposed to be safe: school. The next story begins not at home, not at night, but in the daylight halls of an elementary building where a 7-year-old boy smiled for a photo and then was never seen again. Case 3. Kyron Horman vanished at school June 4, 2010, Portland, Oregon. It was a typical school morning, routine, safe, normal. Kyron Horman, a curious, glasses-wearing 7-year-old, had a big day ahead. His elementary school was holding a science fair, and Kyron had spent days preparing his project on red-eyed tree frogs. That morning, his stepmother, Terry Horman, took a photo of him standing proudly next to his display. He wore a CSI t-shirt and smiled wide for the camera. That photo would become infamous, the last confirmed image ever taken of Kyron, because just hours later, during the busy school day, he simply vanished. No one saw him leave. No one noticed anything strange. A child disappeared from inside a school. The timeline that followed was chaotic and confusing. Terry claimed she last saw Kyron walking toward his classroom around 8:45 a.m., but teachers said he never showed up. Attendance was marked incorrectly. No one realized he was missing until the end of the school day, when the bus driver told his mother, Desiree Young, that Kyron hadn't gotten on the bus. Panic erupted. Police were called. The school was locked down, but by then, it was far too late. Hundreds of people had come and gone, and Kyron was nowhere to be found. What followed became the largest search operation in Oregon's history. Police, volunteers, dogs, helicopters, they scoured the school grounds, nearby woods, rivers, and rural properties. But not a single trace of Kyron was found. No clothing, no belongings, no scent trail. Investigators began to wonder, did he really disappear at school? Or was something more complicated at play? As suspicion turned inward, attention focused sharply on one person, Terry Horman, the stepmother. Her story, demeanor, and digital records would soon raise more questions than answers. Terry said she left the school after taking Kyron's photo, then ran errands to grocery stores, a gym, and back home. But surveillance cameras couldn't confirm her timeline. Her phone records showed strange gaps. And then came the bombshell. A man who knew Terry claimed she had tried to hire him to kill her husband, Kyron's father, just months before the disappearance. That revelation shattered any illusion of stability. Police never publicly charged her, but the suspicion was heavy and the narrative began to shift. Was Kyron's disappearance a cover-up for something darker inside the family? Despite the growing suspicion, no physical evidence ever surfaced to prove Terry's involvement. She maintained her innocence. Meanwhile, Kyron's biological parents, Desiree and Kanie Horman, became outspoken in the media, pleading for answers and publicly blaming Terry. The case became a national sensation, and yet it remained painfully empty. Without witnesses, footage, or forensic proof, the truth stayed buried. And that made it even worse, because when someone disappears from a crowded building in daylight, with dozens of people nearby, and no one sees a thing, it defies logic. It rattles your sense of reality. Kyron's case also exposed troubling gaps in school safety. No security cameras in key areas, doors left unlocked, no system to track who entered or left during events like the science fair. It revealed how vulnerable children can be, even in spaces we trust the most. The horror of Kyron's story isn't just that he vanished. It's that he did so from a place surrounded by adults, and no one noticed until hours later. It forces an uncomfortable question. How many other children could disappear the same way? And how quickly would anyone realize? Over the years, leads poured in. Sightings, letters, psychics, even supposed confessions. But none led to Kyron. The case grew colder, and the media moved on. But his family never did. Desiree, his mother, turned into a full-time advocate, pushing for changes in how missing children cases are handled. She speaks often, holding up Kyron's photo, reminding the world that her son is still missing, and that someone out there knows what happened. Her pain is visible, raw, unfiltered, and like so many parents of missing children, she now lives in the space between hope and heartbreak. Every day. What makes Kyron's disappearance uniquely disturbing is its setting. It wasn't a remote forest or a strange city or a dark night. It was a classroom, a hallway, a place of learning, and he was just a kid, holding a science project and excited for the day. Ahead. No warning, no note, just a gap in time, a hole where a little boy used to be. That image of him smiling, standing beside his tree frog poster has become iconic, not because it tells us anything, but because it's all we have, a single frame, a final moment frozen forever. To this day, no arrests have been made. No body has been found. Kyron Horman is still officially listed as missing, and his family continues to search, through billboards, through interviews, through memories. They still hang his Christmas stocking. They still keep his room. Because for them, he isn't gone. He's waiting, somewhere, somehow. And that belief is the only thing holding them together. As the pain of the Horman family echoes through the years, it reminds us of a brutal truth. Not all wounds bleed. Some are silent, invisible, and stretch endlessly through time. But even silence can be broken. Even cold cases can thaw. And just like Chiron, another child, across the ocean, vanished in a way no one could explain. But this time, it happened under a bright sun, on a family vacation, in a place that was supposed to be safe. And decades later, the search still hasn't ended. Case 4. Ben Needham, lost in a foreign land. It was supposed to be a beautiful summer getaway. In July 1991, 21-month-old Ben Needham traveled with his family from England to the Greek island of Kos. His mother, Kerry, was just 19 at the time, a young single parent hoping for a fresh start. They were staying with Ben's grandparents, who had moved to Kos for work. On the afternoon of July 24th, Kerry left Ben in the care of her parents while she went to her new job at a hotel nearby. Her mother cooked lunch. Her father worked on a house renovation just a few steps away. And Ben was playing outside in the yard. But within minutes, he was gone. No scream, no noise, no trail, just silence and a missing child in the blazing Greek sun. At first, they thought he'd wandered off. The terrain was open, dusty, dotted with stone and brush. Family and locals began searching immediately, calling his name, checking fields, wells, roads. But there was nothing. Not a single sign of the little boy with blonde hair and blue eyes. Panic set in. Police were called, but the local authorities treated the case as a simple accident. They assumed Ben had fallen into a ditch or gotten lost. No evidence was collected, no roadblocks, no urgency. The family begged them to consider another possibility, that someone had taken him, but their pleas were dismissed, and critical hours slipped away. Days turned to weeks. The Greek police refused to treat it as a kidnapping. Meanwhile, the Needham family stayed on the island, plastering Ben's face across walls, shops, and newspapers. Kerry believed, and still believes, that someone took her son. A tourist, a passerby, a local family in need of a child. Over the years, several leads emerged. People across Europe claimed to have seen a boy who looked like Ben. Photos circulated, tips poured in, but none led to him. And just like that, the trail went cold. For years, the case remained in the shadows, underfunded, overlooked, buried beneath language barriers and red tape. One theory grew louder over time, that Ben had been taken by a traveling Roma group, possibly sold into adoption or hidden among nomadic communities. In 1995, a private investigator believed he found Ben living in Turkey, but it turned out to be a false lead. Another child, another heartbreak. DNA testing ruled it out, and the Needhams were back at square one. The emotional toll was relentless. Kerry Needham became a public face of child abduction in the UK, appearing on television, pleading for action. But Kos was far away, and time kept moving forward without answers. Then, in 2016, 25 years after Ben's disappearance, the case took a tragic turn. Greek authorities reopened the investigation and returned to the original site, using ground-penetrating radar and excavation tools. They searched for something they had never considered before: remains. A new theory suggested that Ben might have been accidentally killed by a construction worker, using heavy machinery near the property. Some said the incident may have been covered up to avoid blame, but even after an extensive dig, only fragments were found. Too small, too degraded to confirm anything. A single toy car thought to belong to Ben was recovered. That was all. The news devastated Carrie. After decades of believing her son was alive, she now faced a new possibility: that he had died on that very afternoon, within view of the house. And no one told her. Yet even then, no body was found. No conclusive evidence, just more maybes, more guesses, more silence. And for a mother who had spent over half her life searching, that kind of closure felt like another kind of loss. Ben's case remains open in the UK. His name still appears on international missing persons databases. Facial age progression renderings show what he might look like today. A grown man in his 30s, somewhere in the world, unaware of who he really is. Or maybe he never got the chance to grow up. That duality, hope and finality, defines the emotional torture so many families of missing children endure. Living between timelines, between realities, grieving without a grave. Carrie Needham has spoken publicly about the isolation that comes with a case like this. Being dismissed by foreign authorities, ignored by international media, and having to fight for attention while the rest of the world moved on. She never gave up. She couldn't. Because if there was even a 1% chance her son was out there, she had to try. That kind of love becomes a battle, one that leaves scars no one can see. And even if Ben's voice has long gone silent, her voice still echoes in every plea, every interview, every candlelight vigil. Don't forget him. Don't stop looking. The case of Ben Needham reminds us that sometimes disappearance isn't about darkness or violence. Sometimes it's about being lost in plain sight, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in a system that wasn't ready to help. It shows how fragile the thread of safety really is, especially far from home. And how one moment, one distraction, one unanswered question can fracture a family forever. As we close this chapter, we carry with us not just a list of unsolved cases, but the emotional weight of what they leave behind. Because whether it's a house fire, a walk to school, or a vacation afternoon, the result is the same: a hole in a family, a wound that doesn't scab over, and a silence that grows louder with time. If you've made it this far, these stories probably moved you. You might even feel like someone somewhere still knows the truth. If you believe these families deserve answers, share their names. Keep their faces visible. And if you want more stories that uncover the human side of true crime, subscribe now. Because behind every missing person is a family still waiting.